But podcast was unknown at that time.
Yeah.
And then so that's when we did Drink Champs again. We said it, we did it, and
did people know what you guys were doing though?
They called us nerds.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
What about the hip hop community? Did they think, was there any conversation of N.O.R.E fell off and he's doing this?
Yes.
Wow.
I'm so glad you asked that. I was waiting for this.
Right. Yeah.
And guess what? Can you see one of your favorite rappers without a podcast
right
now?
Tell me about it, man. And respectfully
yes,
come on.
Yes. Listen.
Respectfully so.
Joe and Jada.
Yeah.
Is two of my friends. I love them. But I look at them and I say, look at me.
Yeah. Did any of
look
them...
Look at me. Hold on, let me finish. Look at me. You can look at Jadakiss's intro and I'm like, that's N.O.R.E's intro. You can look at Fat Joe's mannerism of every time he cuts somebody off. You don't think, who you think he got that from? I just cut you off.
You're right. Yeah.
Who you think he got that from? But by the way, this is who I am. I salute that.
Yeah.
I salute that they took our formula, because if you look at the two most guests that we ever had on Drink Champs, it's Fat Joe and Jadakiss.
Amen.
I was one of the first to do that.
I don't think anybody can argue that though.
But they did argue that. But they did. So this is what I'm trying to say. I was one of the first. When I did it, people were saying this is for nerds. Podcast is for nerds. So when I said, and other people I was like, yo, the only podcast that matters is Drink Champs, and I named I believe $1 million worth of game, and I named Joe Buttons, and people took it personal, and they said, why would N.O.R.E say that? And that's not what I meant. What I meant was we the first that made it cool. The other people who did it was Cypher Sounds and Peter Rosenberg. God bless them. I love them so much. But people didn't want to be Cypher Sounds and Rosenberg. When I did it, I'm smoking bud. I'm drinking. People are saying, man, I could do that. I can do what N.O.R.E is doing, and I'm still being myself. And now, I promise you, I look at podcasts, I look at people, and they bit everything I'm doing. They're trying to be their self, and guess what? If I'm mad at that, that's my fault. That's what I wanted to happen. So I can't say, hey, can you please wear that black Nike hoodie? And then you wear the black Nike hoodie and you wear the same black Nike hoodie that I wear on that day, and now I'm mad at you.
Right.
I asked you to do this.
Right. Pull up for a second, because N.O.R.E has jumped out there again, and listen, the way he's explaining this situation feels like a little bit of double talk. 1 minute it's they biting my style, and the next minute it's when I see them, I see myself, and I love it. And I'm sitting here like, hold up, which one is it? I'll drop the link so y'all can watch the full clip yourselves, because this conversation actually happened over on Big Boy's Neighborhood, and they went way deeper than the short clips floating around online. But of course, the blogs grabbed the spiciest part, especially the moment where he name-dropped Jadakiss and Joe Budden directly, and said that when he looks at them, he basically sees pieces of himself in how they move. He even started pointing to little things like intros, cutting people off mid-conversation, and certain podcast habits, saying all of that traces back to him. Then he flipped it and reminded everyone that those two were some of his most viewed guests, which adds another layer to the conversation. And listen, the internet started moving crazy right after that. I'm scrolling through Instagram and the algorithm basically shoved the drama in my face, especially once Fat Joe jumped into the comment section reacting to everything. Then it got even messier when fans started pointing out that Jadakiss himself was liking some of the posts. And that's when I realized the algorithm really does stir the pot. I'm telling you, the internet will drag you through every angle of a story, whether you want to see it or not. But when I actually heard N.O.R.E say this about Joe and Jada, I had to pause for a second and ask, what exactly is he getting at here? Because when you break it down, their whole approach to podcasting feels completely different to me. Maybe I missed something from years ago where they talked about podcasting in a certain way or didn't respect it at first. I don't know. But from the outside looking in, the formats don't even feel close to the same. When you look at Drink Champs, the whole vibe is drinking, smoking, relaxing, and letting artists unpack their entire life story in one long conversation. Meanwhile, what the Joe Budden podcast does is more like structured episodes where guests come through during album runs or media tours. New artists, legends, everybody rotates through, and the conversations move in a totally different direction. Back when N.O.R.E first started popping in the podcast space, those interviews really did feel like full career documentaries that could run for hours. I never looked at those shows and thought they were the same lane. They're not even sitting there drinking and smoking the way Drink Champs built its brand around. That vibe was literally one of the biggest selling points of the show from the beginning. So when N.O.R.E throws Joe and Jada into the "they're biting my style" conversation, I'm honestly trying to figure out where that connection is supposed to be. And y'all gotta remember something important here too. This is the same N.O.R.E who years ago was online clowning people who were trying to start podcasts. So now when those same conversations circle back and you start using words like biting or "they took my style," it hits a little different. Because once you throw language like that out into the public, there's almost no way people won't hear it as a diss. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Maybe there's context behind the scenes that we don't see. But from a distance, when someone says they copied everything I did, that doesn't sound like a compliment. And let's keep it real for a second. When I first got into this space, it wasn't because I saw N.O.R.E doing podcasts. Podcasting was already around before he stepped into it.
Then people in the comments started lining everything up. And listen, once the internet gets involved, the history lessons start flying. If you scroll through, you'll see a lot of folks saying Joe Budden is actually the one who helped pioneer podcasting in rap and hip-hop the way we see it today. That's just how it looked from my perspective when I first came across the space. I personally didn't discover Combat Jack early on, but respect where it's due, rest in peace, and condolences to a real pioneer. Then other people started reminding everyone that Snoop Dogg had his own podcast platform running around 2011 when he launched his network back in the day. And before I ever got deep into what N.O.R. was doing, I was already familiar with voices like Taxstone and the crew behind Rap Radar podcast. Eventually, I started catching clips from the Joe Budden podcast on YouTube without even realizing that's what I was listening to at first. And that's the thing about podcasting. Everybody's entry point into the culture is different. Some people probably saw Drink Champs with N.O.R.E and said, "Yo, that's the lane I want to jump into." That just wasn't the route that clicked for me personally. The reason is simple. My mindset was closer to the Joe Budden format. I knew I didn't have the reach to pull in legendary rappers, superstar guests, or industry icons the way N.O.R.E could. So I looked at it like, hold up, Joe built a platform mostly through conversation with his own crew. That made me feel like, yeah, this is something you can build from the ground up without knowing everybody in the industry. And to be clear, I've never taken anything away from N.O.R.E because his lane is solid and he's carved out a real space in the game. But when he frames the conversation like everyone is biting his style, that's the part that doesn't fully land for me, especially when you look at how different most of these podcast formats actually are. A lot of people will tell you straight up that Joe Budden is one of those major voices in this era. Then you've got shows like $1 Million Worth of Game doing numbers in their own lane with a completely different energy. Even newer shows like Let's Rap About It podcast are building audiences without even relying heavily on guests. So when you step back and look at the whole landscape, it makes you wonder who exactly N.O.R.E was aiming that comment at. I'm just being honest here. I still don't fully get what point he was trying to make. From the outside, it almost feels like he's realizing the podcast space has grown way bigger than one person. Everybody's shining now. Everybody's building platforms, and nobody is doing it alone anymore. But that's exactly what happens when a format takes off and becomes part of the culture. Once people realize it's a powerful medium, whether it's barbershop talk, sports debates, or just real conversations, everybody starts finding their own voice in it. So yeah, maybe I'm missing something in what he meant, but the way it was explained just didn't completely connect for me. At the end of the day though, I genuinely love this media space and everything that comes with it. Being able to talk culture, lifestyle, and have real conversations like this is honestly a blessing, no matter what level you're doing it on. Even if it's not always a traditional podcast format, I still tap into that lane with the crew over at Studio 56. But yeah, that whole N.O.R.E comment still left me scratching my head a little bit. Maybe I'm tripping though. Y'all tell me what you think in the comments. I've got more content dropping over on Patreon as well, so tap in when that goes live. And like always, stay on your pivot.